Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of our distance learning. I wish so badly we were in the classroom, but for now, I will continue to read some Wayside right here for us to all enjoy. I'll probably upload some other read alouds of some shorter stories later today as well, but let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Last time we read chapters 4 and 5. Today we are going to be reading chapters 6 and 7. So here we go. Let me share this with y'all. All right. Golly, I don't know if it's just because I've read this one so many times or if every chapter really is as good as I remember. All right. Pet Day. Here we go. Pet Day. All the kids in Mrs. Jewell's class brought a pet to school. The room was very noisy. Dogs barked, cats meowed, a frog croaked, a pig squealed, a cow mooed, birds tweeted. Let me see if I can do all those. Meow. Ribbit. Mrs. Jewell held up 2 fingers. All the animals became quiet. Stephen didn't have a pet, so he brought an orange. He kept it in a cage on his desk so it couldn't escape. Todd brought Ralphie, his baby brother. Oh my goodness. Todd, asked Mrs. Jewell. Todd barked. You cannot have a pet human, said Mrs. Jewell. He doesn't bite, Todd assured her. Joy told Todd to sit and be quiet. Mrs. Jewell got a large piece of poster board from the supply closet. Let's make a chart, she said. Across the top of her chart, she wrote, name of kid, kind of pet, name of pet. She started with Dee Dee. She wrote Dee Dee under name of kid. Yeah. And you have a dog, she said. Cat, said Mrs. Cat, said Dee Dee. Cat? Asked Mrs. Jewell. Dee Dee nodded as she petted her dog. Mrs. Jewell moved on to Ron. Ron, I see you have a cat. Dog, said Ron as he stroked the cat on his lap. Mrs. Jewell shrugged. Okay, she said. He's my dog, said DJ. Ron has your dog? Asked Mrs. Jewell. Ron has a cat, said DJ. That's what I thought, said Mrs. Jewell. But what's a dog? Said Jenny. Mrs. Jewell covered her ears and shook her head. Let's start all over again, said Mrs. Jewell. She got a new piece of poster board from the supply closet. Mac, what's your dog's name? What's my dog's name? Said Jenny. I'm not talking to you, Jenny. I'm talking to Mac. He can't talk, said Mac. Who can't talk? Asked Mrs. Jewell. Mac, said Mac. Billy barked at Mac. Mac barked at Billy. Todd barked at both of them. Joy made Todd lie down by her feet. Mrs. Jewell moved on. What's your pet, Myron? She asked. Your pet's a turtle, said Sherry. What? Asked Mrs. Jewell. What is Jenny's pet? Said Sherry. Jenny's pet is a dog, said Mrs. Jewell. What's his name, Jenny? Jenny nodded. Her dog sat up straight and tall and seemed to smile at Mrs. Jewell. He's handsome, said Mrs. Jewell. My mouse is handsome, said Benjamin. Benjamin had a little white mouse in a cage on his desk. If you like mice, said Dana, making a face. Mrs. Jewell likes mice, said Calvin. She eats them. Gross, said Dana. He won't come when you call him, said Kathy. He doesn't know his name. Billy meowed. Meow. Will Mrs. Jewell eat yogurt? Asked John. No way, said Calvin. I will too, said Mrs. Jewell. I like yogurt. I like strawberry best. Mauricia beamed. Mrs. Jules likes strawberry best, she bragged. You shouldn't pick favorites, complained Dana. This is a confusing chapter. What is going on? You a little sip of that coffee. Do you like crackers, Mrs. Jules? Asked Rondi. Don't worry, said Calvin. Mrs. Jules won't eat crackers. How do you know what I'll eat, Calvin? Asked Mrs. Jules, a little annoyed. I like eating crackers with cheese on top. Oh, gross, said Myron. He won't come when you call him, Kathy said again. Mac, keep Mac away from my socks, shouted Allison. Wait, said Jason. Now you've got my socks and I've got your socks. I can tell the difference between my socks and your socks, Jason, said Allison. Mrs. Jules covered her ears and shook her head. She moved on. What's your pet, Damien? She asked. I already told you he was a turtle, said Sherry. I wasn't talking to you, Sherry, said Mrs. Jules. I was talking to Damien. Your nose a ferret, said Damien. My nose a ferret? Asked Mrs. Jules. My nose a hamster, said Joe. Billy bleated. Mrs. Jules licked her leg. Hey, Paul, said Leslie. I like your pigtails. Thanks, said Paul. May I touch your pajamas? Go ahead, said Bebe, who was already petting Leslie's pajamas. She won't scratch you. This is crazy, shouted Terrence. He's cute, said Dana. Okay, let's see if we can tie up some of these loose ends. Let's see what's going on here. So Dee Dee has a dog named Cat. Okay. Ron has a cat named Dog. God, these kids are crazy. DJ has a dog named OK. Jenny has a dog named What? Mac has a dog named Mac. Joy has a dog named Todd. Sherry has a turtle named Your Pet. Oh my gosh. Benjamin has a mouse named Handsome. Calvin has a cat named Mrs. Jules. Kathy has a skunk named Gross. John has a frog named Yogurt. Mauricia has a cat named Strawberry. Rondi has a bird named Crackers. Myron has a chipmunk named Cheese. Allison has a cat named Socks. Jason has a cat named Socks. Damien has a ferret named Yorno. Joe has a hamster named Mino. Let's go back and look at this real quick. Yorno's a ferret. Your nose a ferret, said Damien. My nose a ferret, asked Mrs. Jules. My nose a hamster, said Joe. So Damien has a ferret named Yorno. Joe has a hamster named Mino. Paul has a pig named Tails. Leslie has a cat named Pajamas. Terrence has a dog named Crazy. Eric Fry has a goat, a kid. That's a baby goat named Billy. Eric Bacon has a dog named Billy. Eric Ovens has a cat named Billy. Dana has a dog named Pugsy. BB has a bird named Picasso. Todd has a kid named Human, a human kid. Oh, right, his baby brother, Ralphie. And Steven brought an orange in a cage named Fido. My gosh, okay. Let's just hop into chapter 7. I don't have anything to say. I just know Wayside is insane. All right, here we go. Chapter 7, a bad word. Early in the morning, a white limousine drove up to Wayside School, just like always. The chauffeur got out of the car, then opened the passenger door, just like always. Mr. Kidswatter stepped out of the car. Thank you, James, he said. My name is David, said the chauffeur, just like always. Mr. Kidswatter entered the school building. Good morning, Mr. Kidswatter, said Mrs. Day, the school secretary. She handed him a cup of hot coffee, just like always. Thank you, Miss Knight, said Mr. Kidswatter. He walked into his office, except his office door was closed. He smashed into it, spilling coffee all over his green suit. Who closed my door? He demanded. Why didn't you just open it? Asked Mrs. Day. It's always open in the morning, said Mr. Kidswatter. How was I supposed to know it was closed this time? Up on the 30th story, Mrs. Jules took roll. Todd was absent. Oh dear, I hope Todd is all right, said Mrs. Jules. Todd's never all right, said Joy. She and Mauricia laughed. Damien looked at Mrs. Jules. Ever since he returned to Wayside School, he thought there was something different about her, but he still couldn't figure out what it was. Mr. Kidswatter's voice came over the PA system. Good morning, boys and girls. There was a usual pause. Today I want to talk about doors, said Mr. Kidswatter. This should be interesting, said Mrs. Jules. Do you know how many doors there are in this school building? Asked Mr. Kidswatter. Mrs. Jules shook her head. Well, there are a lot, over 30, and some of you probably have doors at home too. Maybe more than one. All those doors. Think about it. Well, Mr. Kidswatter has certainly given us something to think about this morning, said Mrs. Jules. So remember, said Mr. Kidswatter, and please be careful. Always check to see if a door is open before going through it. And if it's not open, open it. If you can't open it yourself, ask someone to open it for you. This may not make a lot of sense to you now, but someday you will thank me. Mrs. Jules looked around the class. That's good advice, she said. I think most of you already knew it, but at least it's nice to know that we have a principal who cares. I hate doors, shouted Mr. Kidswatter. It's a dumb word. Door, door, door. Who made up that word anyway? Mrs. Jules waited a little longer, but Mr. Kidswatter seemed to be finished. Some people just don't like doors, she said. I have made a new rule, declared Mr. Kidswatter. You may no longer say that word. You know what word I mean, but don't say it. Instead, I have made up a new word for you. Guzak. Open the Guzak. Shut the Guzak. Lock the Guzak. Don't you think that's a better word? I do. From now on, that other word is a bad word. I have made my decision. Everyone turned around and looked at the Guzak. Suddenly, it opened. Todd entered. I'm sorry I'm late, he said. That's okay, said Mrs. Jules. I'm just glad you're not sick or hurt. My dad locked his keys in the car, Todd explained. We had to use a coat hanger to unlock the door. Everyone gasped. Mrs. Jules made Todd write his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. All right, well, there it is. Mrs. Jules' class, obviously a lot of crazy pets going on, insane types, confusing names, and now the word door is a bad word at the school. So just remember, always open the Guzak before you try to walk through it. Quiz below. Quiz below.